Okay, so in this module, it was all about how the different modules in your monolith are going to communicate with one another. We talked about a bunch of different ways that could happen. Some of them are direct, some of them are blocking, some of them are non-blocking, and we covered each one of them in turn and showed how we can use them to coordinate and communicate between the modules. We talked about the mediator pattern, and we mentioned how that's going to be your go-to pattern inside the modular monolith because it allows you to communicate between modules without having a compile time dependency between them. You're not going to have that big ball of mud where everything depends on everything else. You're going to have explicit contracts that those modules are going to expose through a contracts project, and that is going to be the thing that is used by these handlers in order to do their job. So mediator is going to route those messages and their responses are going to be defined as those public contracts. Now, as far as messages goes, we talked a little bit about the differences between commands, queries, and events. Those are the three types of messages that we're going to be sending between our modules. And so it's important that you understand the differences between them and when to use each one. Then we talked about non-blocking forms of communication. Again, this is super important for microservices, not so much for modular monolith, but still worth knowing. And so we talked about how we can put queues between things to increase their availability, perhaps at the expense of the system's consistency. We looked at the outbox pattern, which is useful for making sure that events and commands that are happening as a result of some mutation of the state of our system are only sent if that transaction is successful. And we talked about the materialized view, which is kind of on the other side of things, where we want to make sure that we can get quick access to data that is supposedly coming from another system, but rather than call that other system every time we need its data, we're going to keep our own copy of that data and let it call us. Remember the Hollywood principle, don't call us, we'll call you? That's what that other system is telling us. Instead of us calling system B and saying, hey, give me this data, they're like, hey, I'll call you and I'll let you know if anything changes. You just keep it in your system until you hear from me. System A is going to keep its own copy of all that data, and System B is going to let it know anytime there's an update. All right, now we're ready to jump back into code, and we're going to start with the order processing module in the next module of this course.